Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Marc Lesser, who's here to share with us his new book, Finding Clarity: How Compassionate Accountability Builds Vibrant Relationships, Thriving Workplaces, and Meaningful Lives. So Marc is a CEO, Zen teacher, author, and leads trainings and talks worldwide. He has led mindfulness and emotional intelligence programs at many of the world's leading businesses and organizations, including Google, SAP, and Kaiser. So welcome to the show, Marc Lesser.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, it's such an honor to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, it's actually inspired by the practice of compassionate accountability. And of course, that was the original title. But I think the fact that accountability seems to not be a very particularly positive topic. And one day someone asked me, well, what is the book really about? And without even thinking about it, I said, it's really about finding clarity. And it's finding clarity through the practices of holding ourselves and others more accountable, which to me is really another form of alignment and honesty and clarity with compassion, with a sense of real care and openness and trust. And there's something about the practice of integrating accountability and compassion as a way of finding greater clarity in all parts of our lives, in our own lives, and much of the book is written, for the workplace, but so much that is, that is positive and makes sense in the workplace applies equally in all our relationships.
Having a compassionate accountability, my goodness, what a gift that is. And for our listeners that are new to that, what is that?
Yeah, so I would say let's start with what we mean by accountability. And usually when we think of accountability, it's primarily about in relationship, are we clear and are we aligned about what it is we are trying to accomplish, as well as how we are trying to accomplish it? So accountability is such a core practice, such a core way of being in the work world where by definition we are attempting to accomplish things, right? So there is accountability around financial goals and results. There's accountability around timing and projects and showing initiative and how we are responding. And there's also accountability in the way in which we are working together. How do we do with conflict? How do we do with disagreement? Are we creating a place that is a holder of psychological safety where we can express our doubts and fears? So this is the accountability piece. And then a compassion piece. Again, compassion is, I think of there being three parts to compassion. It's feeling the feelings of others. It's wanting to create greater understanding, and it is the desire to help or to heal. So it's super, I think, interesting and powerful when we integrate these. And there can be some tension, some, I think, healthy tension between compassion and accountability, but it's almost always, I think, healthy tension, and that there's incredible possibility and power with this practice of what I'm calling compassionate accountability.
Now, when people tend to avoid conflict or avoid really kind of getting into this place where they're, meeting their problems head on, can that get them in trouble?
Yeah, that's avoiding problems. I've learned through my own experience and through my many the work that I do in the world. Avoiding problems is trouble, and that there's I think this maybe should be the one real takeaway is to have a different relationship with our avoidance and with how we relate to dealing with what looks like difficult conversations or difficult people, difficult relationships, that in some way all of these are opportunities to learn and to grow and to find greater alignment and accountability. And there's and most of us tend to avoid conflict. And then what's interesting about this is it's a way of learning. Anytime where there's something that comes up that stresses us or feels difficult, or we feel like there's some danger or conflict, to notice our own fight, flight, or freeze reaction or response, right? So we humans are hardwired to survive. And because of that hardwiring, anytime where we feel danger, we immediately and habitually, without even it being conscious often, we tend to avoid, or we overreact, or we freeze. And these reactions are playing out regularly in all of our important relationships. And to me, the practice is to become familiar with our own particular habits, the ways that we tend to respond, and to develop a way of transforming those habits into more possibility and more freedom in how we are responding. And to me, this is the key to all of our healthy relationships, again, especially at work and leadership. But man, this same things are playing out, with our partners, our children, our parents, to be able to work a lot more skillfully when there is conflict and disagreement, or with any difficult emotions.
It seems that not everyone, but a lot of people are very wired to immediately get to this place where they're angry and furious. So, how do they get to a place where they can move beyond that? Because that seems to be a really big thing right now.
Well, I feel like you're nicely setting me up for the first chapter of the book is called "Be Curious, Not Furious." And I think we should all have that phrase sewn into our clothing, or a message on our desk. Again, it's in fact, I was just talking to someone who was telling me about a study that was done about what are the core practices or values that have been discovered in people as they get older. What is it that makes people as they get older be more and more happy and well-being and appreciative in their lives? And one of the highest ranking values was curiosity, right? To bring an attitude of curiosity. Again, going back to this, this topic that you raised about conflict, right? So anytime we feel that we are being threatened, or maybe our status or our autonomy, in some way we feel a sense of threat, someone says something, or even, an example would be you're driving and someone, cuts you off on the road, or they've turned into your lane too quickly. We immediately make that person a bad person, and we feel a sense of anger and rage, and we want to maybe retaliate in some way. So the practice is even starting with to be curious about those emotions, to be curious about how we're feeling. It's a little bit like the example of you're crossing the street and someone bumps into you, and you immediately feel anger or betrayed, and then you notice that they're blind. And so this is the context and the stories and the assumptions that we make and tell can be so habitual and get us into so much trouble.
And you're right, I did set you up for the first chapter.
Thank you. Yes, I realize that.
Well, and then there's so many great, you have so much great information in your book, and I just don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. But when we look at this from a business standpoint, I know you talk about different zones that we can be in. Could you explain those to us and why those are important to know?
And it's interesting, I think, to think of curiosity as a practice, as something that we actually need to pay attention to and can get good at. It's also part of curiosity, I think, is to bring awareness to our habitual responses, to our habit energy, to whether we are overreacting or underreacting. And again, this is to move more and more into a zone or a place where we have more choice. One way that I think about mindfulness practice is to shift from compulsion to choice. Or another way that I think of it is seeing things through fresh eyes, seeing everything through more open, fresh eyes, as opposed to whatever our habit energy is, whatever our habitual stories are. And this is you're kind of leading me a bit, or maybe I'm doing it myself. I'm not sure. The second chapter of my book is "Drop the Story," and again, maybe we've are aware of this, or we've heard this. It's a term that maybe is thrown around a lot. That we are storytelling creatures, but to me, it never gets old. Seeing how easily and quickly we create stories, and often, one of the rules of thumb of relationship, which is that we judge other people by the impact their words and actions have on us. We judge ourselves by our intentions. And this is I think, a kind of a base core place where this storytelling emerges in relationship, right? That especially anytime someone says something or does something that bothers us or annoys us or threatens or hurts us, we go right to judging them. We have a story that we tell about that they've hurt us, they've betrayed us. Why did they do that? But when it comes to ourselves, we're all good people, right? We mean well. So it's so interesting. Again, this is instead of going right to story, to be curious about your own feelings, as well as to wonder what was their intention, what was their motivation for saying or doing what they did.
I've often heard people say that other people aren't that interested in what it is that you're doing. So while we're so encompassed in our own little world of things happening, and really kind of having misperceptions about events that happen around us, most of the time it's not really even directed to us.
A lot of the time, this gets into the kind of primal, the egocentricness that most of us have, right? It's all about me. It's all about the world of me, combined with the negativity bias, right? That we tend to, again, because we are hardwired for survival, we are very commonly, readily kind of scanning for threats. We're scanning for anything, externally in the environment. We're very, very sensitive to anything that feels threatening. And internally, we're regularly kind of checking in with, am I okay? Do I look good? How do people feel about me? And this is, as you're kind of pointing out, often way, way overblown and not in sync with any sense of what's really happening with reality. This constant the world of me.
That world of me can get us in trouble, you know?
Well, we need, we we need to have a healthy world of me, right? It's not that, some people can go too far the other way, where, and I think often, sometimes, avoiding conflict can be not having a healthy sense of our own needs, our own observations, our own requests. So this, of course, this is having a healthy sense of what it is we're wanting and needing and seeing. So not avoiding that, but also not overdoing it. And again, I think we overdo it because of the negativity bias. We often worry, because we're scanning for all of the things that could possibly go wrong. Many of those things in our purview are just very unlikely to happen.
So, in the workplace, when someone has to have a difficult conversation with their supervisor and they're not used to confronting problems, how do they work through that?
Yeah, well, this is, in some way, one way that I often think of the workplace, and maybe our lives in general, but it seems even particularly obvious in the workplace. It's one conversation after another, right? That's what we're doing is we're conversing with people, we're communicating with people. And the workplace has its particular challenges because of the roles and status and power that exist. That we there's hierarchical the hierarchical nature, and there's money involved. There's often the pressures of accomplishment and performance. So I think it starts. I think being able to find well-being and effectiveness starts by bringing really understanding our own habit energy and our own patterns, and tuning in, I think, to the habit energy and patterns of others. So you brought in the particular context of how do you have a difficult conversation with anyone, with whether it's with your boss or a colleague or someone who works for you. Again, the context and the relationships matter a lot, but in some way, I think the primary the primary lessons and ways to do it are a lot of similarity. Again, I think it starts with curiosity, and less, being curious and less furious. Being curious about your own story and the other person's story. A really helpful way, to start again, a lot of it is contextual. There's no real cookie cutter for this, but often starting a difficult conversation with, the story that I'm telling myself. For example, you feel like you believe that your boss wants you to be working, at night and on weekends, and you feel a certain pressure to respond. You might bring this up by saying, the story that I'm telling myself is that you have a certain expectation. And I want to start by asking you, what is your expectation about responsiveness, about working at nights, about working on weekends? You might be surprised, what you learn by starting a conversation there. And that particular phrase is very powerful, actually. I find I'm using it often in my life these days, even in conversations with my partner, right? The story I'm telling myself is that you don't care about me as much as I want you to, because I notice you're working a lot these days, or whatever it is. But by it's a way of making yourself vulnerable, and it's a way of creating a little bit of space, instead of starting with anger or blame or assuming that you know what the other person's motivation is. So that's again, there's many tools and tricks and practices, but they're worth learning. They're worth studying the art of how to have what I like to think of as genuine conversations. There's a lot of good books about this, including my book, where I feel like I kind of lay a lot of the groundwork in finding clarity for how to have some of these difficult conversations. Because part of it is developing our own self-awareness and our own presence and way of being is really, I think, again, a very important part. It's not the tools and practices matter a lot, but it's also the way in which you're showing up, developing a mind and a body that is more trustworthy, more safe, more able to have these genuine relationships and conversations.
So, how do people get to this place where they can first realize and then identify some of their stories? Because I would think that they're so ingrained either by just what we've learned from our parents and so on, or just in the environment we're in. It would seem that we would need a starting place for that.
Yeah, it's hard, right? That often we tend to look for people that are telling the same kinds of stories that we are. This is one of the really divisive and hard things about our current, political environment, that we tend to only tune into things that agree with our story. So again, I think even being able to call it a story, but beyond that, I think being willing and curious to talk to people and be with people who have different perspectives, to be open and more flexible to being curious about other perspectives. Sometimes journal writing can be a really useful way to become more familiar with the way this underlying process of storytelling. For example, an exercise that I often suggest to people is to tell your story of failure. Tell me about all your failures. Tell me about all the ways you haven't accomplished what you've wanted to, and all of the ways that you have not met your goals. Really get into it, whether it's in writing or in storytelling form. And now, tell me about how successful you are. Tell me about all of the things that you've done well and that you've succeeded, the goals you've accomplished, how loved you are. Again, almost all of us, I think, I know I can really get into either of those stories, depending on my mood or the time of day, and by playing with that kind of storytelling, it gives us some insight into just what amazing storytellers we are. Again, starting with ourselves and how we view our own lives.
I find this topic so fascinating because there's so much work that we can do in our own environment, in our own world, that we could shift by really questioning the stories that we tell each other, ourselves, and what it is we choose to believe.
For sure. And this gets into, we're talking about, in relationship, in the work world, but it even, very broadly speaking, there's even the stories about how we think about birth and life and death, right? The stories we tell ourselves about our own consciousness, and why are we here on the planet, and what do we really think is going on in terms of space and time, and and how do we think about the sacred? What is how we can so easily get caught in the ordinary world and lose sight of how mysterious and sacred everything actually is. And if we can open to that, how that also kind of shifts everything. I mean, one of the things that I like to do, when I'm leading, meditation retreats is have people go on what I call, an awe walk. Um, you know, when you go during walking meditation, or even anytime, if you take a break during your busy workday, just see what it's like to see everything through fresh eyes. Go look at a tree as though you've never seen it before. Like just stand there and marvel at the tree or the clouds or the sky. I mean, it's there's an expression that Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki in his collection of talks, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. There's a piece in there which I've been studying where he says, the world is its own magic. The world is its own magic. And in some way, to me, this is just maybe an advanced form of curiosity, right? This throwaway term, curiosity, but to bring it to kind of unpack it and bring it a little bit more into the richness of our lives is like to see through fresh eyes, this kind of radical sense of curiosity.
So, how important is it that we listen and not just listen to hear what they're saying, but truly, in many ways, just let our beliefs or our prejudice or what thoughts go and really truly listen to what the person's saying?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think in some way we all have heard it, right? Throughout a thousand times, right? The importance of listening, but there are, I think it can't be overestimated how valuable it is, and to listen, on many, many different levels, right? To listen not only for the content of what's being said, to listen to the feeling tone, to listen for identity issues, to listen for where is there alignment here and where are there gaps in alignment. So again, it's maybe a subset or related to this practice of curiosity. How do we express curiosity? One core way that we express it is through listening and noticing how often it starts with, I think, noticing how often we don't listen. When a practice that I love doing with people is, get with a partner and for 3 minutes have one person speak and the other person just listen without interrupting, without asking questions. So this is a kind of an artificial exercise, but it's a very, I think, eye-opening exercise to see how hard it is for most people just to listen. Because usually we're problem solving, we're interjecting, we're responding often in ways without really taking the time to just really tune in and listen and create the space for someone to express what they're thinking and feeling, right? So to be really curious, to try that on. What is it like? What happens when we are not interjecting or responding too quickly, but creating enough space to see what might unfold if we really listen?
In your book, you share about, and it's funny, I actually look for this when I get emails a lot of the times, how to use we and not I. And I'd love for you to kind of just explain the logic behind that.
Yeah, I think similar to what we've been saying about that, we tend to emphasize the world of me, the world of I, and it's easy to underestimate just how important essential relationship is, right? So to shift, and this is again, I think this is blatantly true in our work lives, but it's true in our families as well. To see, the family as a unit. What kind of feeling tone, what kind of culture do we want to create in our family? And again, we need to have strong, healthy sense of our individualistic way of being, but our culture tends to way overemphasize the individual um, and not see the importance of relationship. I just got I got an email this morning. There's a group that I'm part of, and one of the members of the group wrote me a note saying that he wasn't sure this was a good use of his time because this group doesn't actually do anything. We don't actually get anything done. And I wrote him back and saying, that's the whole point. My therapist doesn't do anything. My coach doesn't do anything. Some of the support groups that I'm in, their value is in just being able to listen and help me deepen my sense of relationship. And by practicing and building the muscle of relationship within some of these groups that don't do anything can support me and make me much more effective when I am in a doing mode, in a working mode. Yeah, there's so often we go way too quickly toward problem solving and getting stuff done, and not enough toward the value of connection and the heart and relationship. And that's that shift that you're talking about from me to we.
It seems like this book can't come at a better time, especially when it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong here, I mean, who knows, but it seems to me that a lot of people are so disconnected and used to texting and being completely on their phones that actually having face-to-face conversations and dealing with things like challenges is something they are not prepared for at all.
Yeah, well, this is it's been potent these last few years here with the pandemic, and how that has had some advantages and disadvantages. But one of the big disadvantages is how it has separated us and made us more dependent on working alone and virtual, and more dependent on conversations, relationships that lose all of the richness and information about when we're actually together. And that's, I think, that combined with how much time people spend on social media and screens. Again, there may be many positives to that, but there definitely are drawbacks to that, and challenges to seeing and feeling and working with our kind of common humanity.
So what are some points that you use when you're doing your workshops and speaking engagements that seems to kind of get people to not really snap out of it, but to snap into a different way of thinking?
Well, I was just thinking of what I describe as Winston Churchill's kind of 3 lessons for how to engage with really difficult situations. And this was something that he expressed, and the way that he showed up as a leader during some of the most difficult times in London in World War II, where London was being firebombed by the Germans. And he had 3 ways that he wanted to show up as a leader. And I find these kind of useful lessons, not only at work, but in lots of parts of our lives. The first is no sugarcoating, right? To start with, being willing to see things clearly, being willing to see things as they are. The second is cautious optimism, right? So again, these things there may be some tension about no sugarcoating, right? Like being real, being as real as we possibly can about what are the challenges here, what is difficult, what am I feeling, what are the people around me feeling, but then from there to bring as much optimism, but a cautious optimism, right? To see again, I think I think these three pieces work really well in even things like climate change, for example, right? So start with no sugarcoating, and then cautious optimism, and the third piece is to bring in meaning and purpose, right? The power, again, you know, the bad news is we are storytelling creatures, and the good news is that we are storytelling creatures, right? That the bad news is that we can easily go down the road of the negativity bias, and we can catastrophize, right? Even, so something, for example, like climate change, it's an emergency, right? There really is a climate emergency. We're seeing it all around us, and and at the same time, we can step back and look through the lens of meaning and purpose and world history and the possibility that we are going to figure this out. We are going to come together through a mutual sense of mutual meaning and purpose and caring. We have the ability without a doubt to turn that around. And again, I'm using this big, gnarly problem of climate change, but the same principles can apply to, strifes and disagreements in our family life or in our work life, right? So no sugarcoating, cautious optimism, and finding and living with a sense of meaning and purpose are, I think, some valuable tools.
But so let's say that we're in a group that's, of people who really want to start learning and listening and making changes, but maybe we have one or two people in the group who could care less and they're just there. How do we work with everybody that's there in a workplace setting?
It makes me think of many years ago, I did a 1-day mindfulness, emotional intelligence leadership training for a group of Google doctors. These were doctors and healthcare workers, and at the beginning of this session, we went around and asked each person to say a couple words about what they were bringing into this day, how they were feeling, and there were definitely several people who expressed skepticism and were maybe confused, or so it was an interesting group in that, many people were there because they were looking forward to being there, wanted to be there, but there were a number of people, like you were just describing, who I think felt like they had to be there. It was kind of a team thing, and their boss wanted them to be there. In general, I would have to say, when it comes to workshops and trainings, I only want people there who opt in. But sometimes things like this happen. And what was interesting is that I felt like during this day, we were able to create and demonstrate a sense of safety and connection, and a real sense of openness and possibility, so that even the people who were skeptical going in, had an experience that surprised them, where they felt more safety and connection. And when we went around at the end of the day, it was quite heartwarming to hear that there had been some shifts during the day. So I think it starts with our own presence, not forcing things, teaching and demonstrating and shifting through people seeing, I think, that we are bringing us, that we're modeling flexibility, we're modeling curiosity, we're modeling listening. Another rule of thumb in this realm is, whatever it is you are wanting from another person, right? So maybe you want more attention, or you want more care, or whatever it is, you go first instead of, so often we hold back and we wait for others, because we're angry or we're frustrated or whatever it might be. So it means taking a risk. It means breaking through that. But I've seen it be so valuable again and again in my own life, right? Whatever it is I'm needing from the people around me, for me to demonstrate it first rather than waiting for them.
In your book, you talk about the 4 most important words. I'd love for you to share that with us and why.
Yeah, this came up in a story that I was telling about going for a walk with my grown daughter, in which there had been some tension around. There was some really big miscommunication issues that had occurred, and I knew that there was that she was disappointed about some things that have happened, maybe even a little angry, a little bit skeptical about where we were. And on this walk, I stopped and turned to her and I said, "How are we doing?" And and I realized in that just being able to stop and ask, right, those 4 words were immensely important, right? It showed that I cared. It showed that I was truly interested in wanting to know how she felt and how we could close any of the gaps that were there between us. And I find, especially again in the workplace, such a great question, right? To ask one's boss or to ask people who work for us or our colleagues. It's just a simple, direct, hopefully safe way to check in and gather some information. There are many different ways to ask this. I remember in the last company that I started, when I was just starting to hire people, and I had a bunch of new relationships. I was on a phone call with this young woman who was working for me, and I stopped and said, "Can you tell me, are there some ways that I frustrate you, or that you'd like me to be doing something different, or something I could be doing different to help our relationship be more effective?" So very powerful, I think. Again, various forms of the "How are we doing?" question that are really useful in building relationships and trust and effectiveness.
That does require that you be extremely vulnerable when you're saying that, because you may not get answers that I know some people may not get answers that they want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, another form of the "How are we doing?" is I'm a big proponent of, in the workplace, doing anonymous surveys. Right. So having all of the people in your team or in the company, in your organization, fill out a form without them needing to say who it is, that where you ask them questions about, how do you feel about working here? How would you describe this culture? How do you think your manager's doing? How's this? How are you doing with the CEO? And you invariably find that people hold a big variety of assessments about the culture, the company, the management, and they can be hard. It can be hard. I know it was for me. It's often to get that information and to see that that not everyone thinks this is a great company to work for. Not everyone thinks that I'm a great leader, but it gives really, really valuable information. I'd rather have that information than not. I'd rather have people be able to talk to me, even if it's through an anonymous survey. I would hope it could be directly, but in whatever way I can get this information, I'd rather it be that than people quitting because they're unhappy, or people going home and grumbling, to their partners or families about, how unhappy they are at work. It's hard, creating safe, open, energetic, thriving workplaces is ongoing work. It takes a good deal of emotional intelligence and communication skills and trust building. And again, the same is true. I'd say having a healthy, dynamic family culture. It takes a lot of good effort and skill to do it.
It would seem that cultivating these type of relationships isn't something that happens with one meeting or one question survey being filled out. It's something that happens over the course of time.
Yeah, it's I like to say that change happens gradually and sometimes all at once. But in this way, mostly in terms of culture building, relationship building, ongoing kind of filling the tank of trust, filling the tank of care, and compassion and accountability. Right? These are practices that are a continuous practice, ongoing practices.
So, what would you like readers and our listeners to really take away from your book?
I think it's a lot of the things we've been talking about around curiosity, around listening, around having not avoiding conflict, seeing that conflict is trouble, and also to to really look at your own self-care practices, well-being practices, self-compassion practices. Again, I feel like this is the starting point, and again, a kind of a radical sense of curiosity about your pains and your possibilities. To look with a radical curiosity through what's not working, what's hard, what's challenging, and what's possible. What is your greatest aspiration for what your life and your work, your relationships? What would you really most aspire your life to look like?
So, it's important for us to have a vision.
Yeah. This is all of these things in some way, right? That vision is again. I see vision as a practice, something that could be cultivated, but a vision that is big and broad and also aspirational and flexible. I've noticed. I'm having a group over to my house tonight, where I'm making dinner, and I notice I hold this vision for what my meal might look like, and it's interesting how it comes up for me a little bit at times during the day, and sometimes it'll shift dramatically, but sometimes it'll just grow and develop about like what it is I'm planning to create, and there's something about, and the same is true. That same process, I notice, for me happens in whether it's books that I'm wanting to write, or companies that I'm wanting to start, or relationships that I'm wanting to cultivate. This is, I think, the positive, magical part of our storytelling, of our ability to imagine and then work toward creating with curiosity and flexibility those visions that we have.
Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work and your podcast and your other books?
Yeah, well, my podcast is Zen Bones, available anywhere, and my website is Marc Lesser, MarcLesser.net, and you can lots of writing and guided meditations, and I try to make my my website of value for people.
Well, Marc, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mark. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Finding Clarity: How Compassionate Accountability Builds Vibrant Relationships, Thriving Workplaces, and Meaningful Lives. Finding Clarity is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. We love supporting our indie bookstores. You can also purchase this book from the publisher New World Library at newworldlibrary.com. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.